How's it going out there, psoriasis healing warriors? How you doing? Today's topic is about the connection of leaky gut syndrome and psoriasis. So leaky gut syndrome is something that's very well supported, and it definitely is something that needs to be addressed. Every person who's going into a natural healing practice needs to consider the health of their gut first and foremost. All healing begins and ends in the gut. So the wall, which actually covers about 4,000 square feet, and of course our immune cells and our immune system, it's the wall between that and then everything that passes through us that we swallow, that we drink, and all of course the microbial activity that happens around everything that we eat and drink. That wall is extremely important because we do not want there to be too thin or to have the interactions between any type of bad bacteria or even our good bacteria. We do not want those to be too close to our immune cells. We need to have a nice solid lining there and a good healthy activity going on around there. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. What I feel from my experience, what I think is actually going on in there that's causing inflammation, that's burning up the gut wall or making it thinner, or what leaky gut syndrome actually is, which is intestinal permeability or thinning of that wall. The inflammation that drives that, and then of course all these immune responses we have that are very sensitive, allergic responses, or these deeper conditions such as psoriasis, eczema, and so on. These types of responses to immune system is having that is being exacerbated or amplified by a thin, weakened, inflamed wall that separates our bloodstream from our digestive tract. Leaky gut syndrome is a working theory of application of that. As the wall thins and becomes too thin, that small microscopic pieces of debris, foods, bacterial, as I just was talking about, bad bacterial endotoxin, or that will slip through and leak through the wall into the bloodstream, which then the immune cells will have a powerful, strong response to that, because now it's leaking into the circulatory system, into the lymph system. A response is needed. I don't necessarily feel that actual microscopic chunks and bits are leaking through holes in this wall. What I do feel and think is happening, based on my experience, is that gases that are produced, just like as this endotoxin is being produced by a bad bacteria, a gas is also produced. To keep the bad toilet humor going, just think of it when you release gas, or when you fart or pass gas, when you have eaten too much, or you have indigestion and your body's pushing that air out. It's pushing it out of you. But if the wall is thin and leaking and permeable, and these gases, as they're being forced around, can then be forced through these thinned walls and into the bloodstream, causing the blood to become sicker. Depending on what's producing the gases can be different mixtures of toxicity and all kinds of bad stuff. I think that's kind of what more so is happening here when the gut wall has become thinned and inflamed and porous, is that these gases are seeping through, these ammonia type gases from putrefying food or rotting animal meat in the colon, or who knows, a mercury filling that you swallowed after a tooth operation years ago that's been down there for who knows how long and it doesn't biodegrade. There could be a myriad of issues, or what these actual toxic gases are coming from. But I think the premise is that the mechanisms that they're leaking through the wall, causing the blood to become sick and thicker, the oxygenation goes down. Our blood cells have to have a good level of oxygen, so they can deliver that to the body. That's part of their massive job. It's not just the nutrients from what we eat and absorb, but also the oxygen, right? The H's and the O's, hydrogen and the oxygen, needs to be delivered. So those blood cells, the health of our blood cells is extremely important, because they heal first, and then they can start to support and supply other cells and tissues and organs of the body to continue the process. So let me get some water here. I have your medicine water, right? This is my typical medicine water. This is a 32-ounce glass bottle that I'm reusing. This has liquid chlorophyll in it, paraben-free. This has liquid zinc sulfate, and I'm using a little bit of colloidal silver right now, just a few drops of that. I don't use that all the time, but every day I drink down some liquid chlorophyll, some liquid zinc sulfate, and then of course some filtered water. And I use glass bottles now, trying to minimize exposure to plastics. All right, so this is how this is going to end up happening. The theme of today's talk, because I'm fresh off of finishing the Game of Thrones series, as I'm sure millions of other people are, the TV show Game of Thrones, if you're not familiar with it. Today's theme is the Watchers on the Wall. What I mean is the bacteria, our gut bacteria, and versus then bad bacteria that are also inhabiting our guts and growing out of control sometimes, especially in a weakened condition, especially when there's a lot of foods coming through that feed those bad bacteria and do not feed our good bacteria. So we're going to talk about those two aspects. We're going to talk about the bacteria and other microbes, small microorganisms that release byproducts that are either helping us or harming us. Then we're going to talk about food sources, our food sources for the good guys, our resident gut bacteria, food sources for probiotics that we take, and then food sources that feed bad bacteria and cause them to proliferate more if they're there and causing issues. And then finally, we'll chat real quick about antibiotics and other medications and how that can exacerbate the situation with our good bacteria. So as I said, my sequence here with leaky gut is not that leaky gut causes psoriasis. It is something that exacerbates the symptoms of psoriasis and exacerbates an immune response. But what is the inflammation coming from that's burning up the gut wall? What's destroying the wall to begin with? What's thinning that wall? And I think over time, as we kind of on typical modern diets, we've gotten away from diets that really nurture that gut wall and nurture the bacteria that give off byproducts that reinforce the gut wall of substances like butyrate that actually rebuild the gut wall are given off by certain bacteria that we have in our guts. Now, our gut bacteria is unique to each one of us in certain ways, but many times we have overlapping strains and species that help us keep our gut wall reinforced and keep it strong. Over time, with high amounts of acidic food, or if you do have an infection at one time that was in the stomach, say you got a stomach virus or a lower intestinal tract infection, that the symptoms of the active infection might go away, but that doesn't mean that all of the disease-causing pathogens have gone away, and they can fester in the gut, and they sit down there because there's typically food sources are coming through our digestive tract. And just like us, bacteria need to feed. They need to eat. Good bacteria, bad bacteria, they're all living organisms. They all eat and they all poop, right? Just like us. And it's that poop, it's the toxin that bad pathogens will give off that can really burn up that gut wall. Bacteria give off known as endotoxin. And this is just byproduct of their metabolism. So when they eat something that's a food source they prefer, and then they give off an endotoxin that then burns up our gut wall, well, it can make it thinner. And if this is happening on a repetitive basis, then you have a chronic situation where the gut wall is burning over time. Now, there's also a sense where our good bacteria, if they are starving, if we're not eating a high fiber diet, we're not eating rich plant foods that feed them complex fibers, complex carbohydrates that we cannot digest, that then pass through us into our lower intestinal tract, the large intestine, into the colon. Well, these organisms can digest it. It just so happens, this is symbiosis at play here. They can digest these complex fibers. And when they do, of course, they live a healthier lifestyle. They're fed, they're happy, and they produce byproducts that actually help us, like I said, reinforce the gut wall. They produce our gut bacteria and probiotics produce short chain fatty acids. Certain strains do. These short chain fatty acids directly regulate immune cell function. So they improve what's known as the Treg cells of the immune system. They improve their performance. And those Treg cells, the regulatory cells of the immune system, are actually regulating the response that the immune system has to an infection, whether it's an active infection or an ongoing challenge that the immune system is facing. So that can right there lower inflammation almost directly. But these good bacteria, if they are starving, well, they're also going to be dying back in their numbers. They're also going to be looking for food any way they can. And it just so happens that along this intestinal wall, there's a mucus layer. It's made up a lot of these thick, complex carbohydrate, almost like a backup food supply for the good bacteria. Why would our bodies genetically over thousands of years develop this mucus lining that feeds these critters? Well, during times of famine, it's not just us going through times we can't find food, but it's these trillions of bacterial cells that are down in our gut that can't find food. So they need a backup food source, and the body will produce this lining. Well, it needs materials, of course, to build this wall and keep it strong and produce this lining. And if it doesn't have those materials, it cannot reproduce this lining. So as the good bacteria are munching on this backup food supply, that's also thinning this wall. It's even putting our good bacteria dangerously close to the immune cells that line up all along the outside of the wall and take information. These immune cells take information from the many, many microbes and bacteria in our gut. They pass information along, what's good, what's bad, what to watch out for. Is this strep pathogenic strep, or is it a docile one? There's a constant passing of information along the wall, back and forth. So let's get back to the breakdown of what leaky gut syndrome is believed to be and is practiced as. Dr. Bogano brought this to the table in his book, Healing Psoriasis, and it really opened my eyes to the sense of, I do have a lot of these symptoms he's talking about. Okay, so that's what I feel is actually happening. Well, okay, Matt, well, what the heck do we do about this? How do we heal our gut? There's a lot of great ways to do it. Number one is we can improve the amount of fiber that we have in the diet. That's instantly going to start reinforcing and feeding your good guys, your bacteria, the good bacteria, the residents. It's going to start feeding them so they can start making a comeback. And this is where I want to discuss antibiotics real quick. If you have taken antibiotics, say for strep infection that could have been resistant possibly, antibiotics can be a napalm on your good bacteria. I didn't have any problems in my life with skin or any other chronic conditions until after a series of having a strep infection in my throat, a root canal, which was a deep trauma in the jaw, and then 3 or 4 courses of antibiotics. That was the first time in my life I had done that. And then after the antibiotics, and I thought I had recovered from the jaw surgery, the root canal, and the strep infection, well, cystic acne came out. Just pustular, nasty cystic acne, which I also feel is driven by strep. So then I had antibiotics. That was the course of treatment, was antibiotics for that. So here I am taking tetracycline for that. And then after a few more traumas, right there though, at that time in my life, is then psoriasis came. It was a deeper immune response. It wasn't just an allergic response and all these allergies I had my whole life. This was something deeper. It was a survival mechanism the body was putting in place that was more severe, and it had to handle it. And that's why I think psoriasis is very tough to get rid of, because it's just your body has put itself into a deep crutch of how it deals with the symptoms of a poor gut health, and also dealing with vicious, highly advanced bacterial and viral infections that can get all around the body. It can get all in different parts of the body and cause trauma everywhere. But no matter where they are in the body and causing problems, they always have to be rooted in the gut and bowel, because they need food sources. And they need to be percolating food sources. And the easiest place to grab food sources is the gut. Or where a strep prefers, right there in your tonsils and your throat and your teeth, where food gets trapped and sugar, and whatever it likes to eat, just things like eggs and corn and cheese. Strep prefers all these types of foods that coagulate and get stuck in your mucus lining. That's why strep is constantly in the sinuses of people, causing terrible skin problems on the face like acne and rosacea, but also causing chronic sinus infection, chronic allergies, seasonal allergic disorder. These can all be things based on this activity of a bacteria that's just feeding on what you're eating on. And then, giving off its endotoxin wherever it happens to be. And that endotoxin, of course, what I said, this is what driving the immune responses, these endotoxins that are floating around, not just in our gut, but everywhere. So that's my wrap in on antibiotics. Antibiotics, as I was talking about my narrative there, my story is after the antibiotic treatments, I didn't even consider the fact that antibiotics are not discriminatory, which meaning they kill and harm and destroy thousands of species of bacteria, good and bad. And, you know, there's antibiotics that are being more focused and targeted. I'm not saying they're all the same. Some are very strong and some are more, you know, docile based on what they're being prescribed for. But at that time in my life, not ever having been exposed to antibiotics because I didn't have them growing up, now in my life I had a lot of them around serious trauma. I think those antibiotics also really hurt and harmed and wiped out my resident gut bacteria. You know, this is 15 years ago, but it set the stage for leaky gut to take place. Leaky gut was the next stage, and it's over a few years of, you know, I was in college at that time, poor diet, highly inflammatory diet, acidic sugar, pizza, beer stuff. That, of course, exacerbates it, but that's not the causal factor. I think the causal factor here, what's come the chicken before the egg, which is leaky gut and beyond, is pathogenic activity, pathogenic infection, proliferation, problems with bacteria specifically, and more especially the resistant strains and forms that are resistant to the antibiotics we try to take to treat them, which push them around the body more and deeper. I think that is where it starts. So in a natural healing practice, and I suggest somebody, well, where do I begin? I suggest you start with a diet that's fiber rich, like I said, antioxidant rich, herb rich, foods that kill and knock out bacteria like strep and bad viruses as well. Foods that they will never be immune to, such as, whereas antibiotics, some certain strains can become immune and become an even bigger problem at that point. But foods and herbs that they cannot build immunity to. I think slippery elm bark tea is fantastic. I did that for the first 6 months. I think that's pretty sure that's what Pagano suggested. He didn't really suggest that as a long-term, constant, ongoing thing. He suggested at the beginning to kind of use it like mortar paste to plug up the holes as the body rebuilt. L-Glutamine, I wouldn't really supplement L-Glutamine out of the gates, high amounts of it, but if you want to consider plant foods that are L-Glutamine rich, if you're doing bone broth soups, you know, make some bone broth vegetable soups. Bone broth has a high level of L-Glutamine, you know, and L-Glutamine supplements are fine. Just look at your sourcing and start small. But my focus being is, okay, we need to reinstate and reinforce the watchers on the wall, bacteria that help the wall stay strong for the long run. How do we keep them healthy? How do we bring them back? And a fiber-rich diet is a great start. So what do I mean by fibers? Just plant fibers, like, you know, fruits and vegetables, of course. I have priority lists on my spreadsheet, and I'll add some of the priority foods into the description of the video here. But fiber-rich foods, apples are fantastic. The berries all have great fiber. They also have high levels of antioxidants. The antioxidants are to knock out and kill back the strep. So, and they also deal with the byproduct of the strep. I'm sorry, I say the strep specifically because that's what I'm dealing with. Whatever pathogens you happen to be dealing with, I do feel that everyone in here who's battling psoriasis, eczema, acne, internal issues too, IBD, IBS, Crohn's disease, colitis, are dealing with an overgrowth of certain bacteria that have gotten out of control, become too aggressive. Maybe before they were okay, now they're not because they've gotten a certain food source for too long, or they came in contact with an antibiotic that pissed them off and mutated them into something awful. Whatever the case may be, there's certain ways that their life, and they're going to evolve just like we are. They are just evolving very fast. We evolve every 20 years, they're evolving every hour. So it's very important to really help the good bacteria and then knock down bad pathogenic bacteria. If you've had a strep infection, if you can connect some dots, if you had a bad infection of the gut or the bowel, don't just think that because your symptoms of the active infection went away that you're done now. You could be something deeper, like I said, a deeper mechanism the body has come up with where the body's dealing with the toxin, but it can't fight off what's causing the toxin without strengthening and rebuilding the gut wall. Developing taking back those strongholds in the gut and bowel is certainly where it begins. But a fiber-rich diet, high in fruits and vegetables and herbs, you know, cilantro, ginger, teas like lemon balm tea, nettle leaf tea, burdock root, turmeric is fantastic no matter what you're dealing with because turmeric's going to bring inflammation down. It brings inflammation down because it helps knock out these bad bacteria that are causing inflammation. Ginger is not just an anti-inflammatory food. Ginger knocks out bad bacteria, it knocks out strep. It's very, very potent against that. and they can't form immunity to it. So you just continue to eat it, it's going to continue to knock this stuff out. That's why this is a lifestyle and a diet, and it's long term. It's just it's you got to continue to change the foods that you eat, and you got to keep bringing them in, because you're changing an entire ecosystem inside of you. That's how you have to picture this. Picture yourself like the Amazon rainforest inside. You need diversity. You don't just need a lot of good gut bacteria. You want diversity. We get diversity by eating a diverse amount, different types of foods. Different foods, different bacteria like, and different foods that you eat, bacteria come in with them. Fermented foods are fantastic. Fermented foods bring in the probiotics with them. So they have their own food source as they come in. I take plant and soil probiotics. Many warriors do, with great results. The ones who get the best results are the ones who take the plant and soil probiotics, but also focus on a high fiber, plant-based fiber diet to feed all of these probiotics we're swallowing. But not just the probiotics, we're also reinforcing and reinstating our unique gut bacteria community. Okay, so if you're trying to correct leaky gut, if you're trying to rebuild a wall, what's going on with the community you're trying to defend with the wall? What is the status? How are the people happy? Are the rulers peaceful? I mean, what's going on in there? You have to start working on that community. You have to be fostering the ambassador of this community inside of you, this rainforest, more so than just trying to focus on building the wall. We need to reinforce the inhabitants that live on each side of the wall. We need to make sure that they like each other, that they're happy, and that relationship is congruent and it's a happy one. So a strong wall in that sense really helps. The more plant matter we're eating to feed bacteria, then the less the bacteria has to try and eat at that mucus lining. So you can even reinforce that lining by, bringing down your smoothies, bringing down a lot of cellulose, leafy greens, leafy greens, all kinds of leafy greens. Get the organic mix. Kale's fantastic. The more spinach you can eat, the better. Radishes are fantastic on your salads. Those are all good foods to bring in a diverse amount of fiber that we need. So I always, I have a kind of a personal rule. I typically always eat a salad before dinner. Sometimes I just eat a big salad and I'm not hungry enough to have a dinner, because fiber fills you up. It's really good that way. We don't have to we eat nutrient dense, high calorie, fiber rich foods. It's actually a very healthy way to not only reverse chronic disease, but also improve any cardiovascular issues that aren't known as chronic or autoimmune, but still give you chronic pain and discomfort. You're going to be healing all that as well when you're focused on this community inside of you, this massive community of our gut bacteria and the foods that we eat, and then the bad bacteria that are using us as a host to live out their lives. But it just so happens that their endotoxin and the stuff they give off causes problems. The indifference was the enemy. I wasn't taking any kind of responsibility for the fact that, oh wow, well, everything, my lifestyle, my diet is making all of this worse, or setting the stage. I can change the stage. And by focusing on the healthy community and a healthy gut, I've been doing that. And the psoriasis is coming and going, and it's vicious and it looks awful, and it cleared up completely, and then it came back even worse than it ever was the first time, and erythrodermic and all up and down my legs. And as that's going on, I'm also dealing with all these symptoms of acne again on my wrists and on my legs, and I have a lot of healing still left to do. But what I know I have strong now is a good sense of, I am the ambassador of this community. I am the king, you're the king or the queen of these lands inside of you. You need to take responsibility for the whole entire community. It's up to you, okay? It's not just about, well, I tried diet for a while and that didn't work, and so now I'm on to the other thing. This is not about trying something for a couple of days or a couple of weeks or a couple of months. This is about rebuilding Rome. And it certainly wasn't built in a day, and it won't be built in a day or a week. That the things you're adding in that are making you feel stronger overall, more energetic, healthier overall, regardless of what's going on the skin. But inside, how do you feel as you improve? It's 6 days, 6 weeks, and 6 months. Signs of overcoming leaky gut syndrome are symptoms going away, such as heartburn, that chronic reflux. I used to have that before I was healing, and I was young, chronic reflux. I was taking medication for it in my mid-20s. Burning up my throat. Oh man, I couldn't sleep. And of course it was tied into what I was eating, but I didn't have the mind for that yet. I wasn't even thinking about it. that connection, strong connection. But I was taking meds for it, and and just clogging up my poor weak stomach with basing it with these meds to offset the acid. But noticing that heartburn goes away is a good sign that your gut's starting to make a comeback. After that stuff starts leveling out and going away, which takes about 6 weeks if you're disciplined, if you're juicing and drinking water and changing what you're putting in the system and what you're putting in your body, trying to keep some things out that are certainly causing you inflammation. They're certainly feeding the bad pathogens that are harming you. Keep some of that stuff out. But at 6 weeks, you should notice those symptoms improving. So then at about 6 months, maybe then on the skin, you'll start seeing some differences. But in the meantime, the skin is going to show probably symptoms of things being worse because it's dealing with the die-off of all this bad bacteria that your body's now able to fight against. And so you're going to have, the skin's going to be up and down and roller coaster ride. So don't really measure your progress based on the skin. Measure your progress on overcoming these so-called syndromes like leaky gut syndrome and the symptoms associated with that. Like I just mentioned, see how you feel, how your digestion improves, how the heartburn goes away, how your bowel movement starts happening on a schedule. And these are the things you got to notice. This is the gut wall that's coming back. It's about taking care of the community that the wall defends, because they are the ones that are going to be the watchers on the wall. They are going to keep your wall strong, your gut wall healthy, not permeable. They're going to keep the bad bacteria down. The more good bacteria you have in your gut community, the less resources there are for the bad guys. It's a resource battle in there. Everybody has to eat. So if you're eating foods that feed the good guys and not eating foods that we're feeding the bad ones, well, they're going to have to leave. And believe me, they'll leave. They're going to run, and you're going to see symptoms as they run. They're going to run all around trying to find something they want to eat. Eggs, high processed sugar, whatever they're looking for. They're going to want to try and find it. And they're going to find it all around your body because it's still stored in all your fat cells that need to be burned off. But just give the body time. Give it 6 months. Start 6 days, then 6 weeks, and 6 months. In a practical sense. Don't start measuring this 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months until you've gotten along the line of these skills that you've been building up. So I'd say start measuring your 6 month healing period from the day that you started with your water and your juicing and your high fiber diet's been going for a little while. Now start measuring your time. Don't start from the beginning because your body's going to need time as you're learning new skills, as you're treating your body better.